Ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with Vocaloid. I don't even know how I came across them, I've just always been a huge fan of them. And one of my earliest cosplays was actually Rin. I didn't have a full cosplay of her, I had a wig and then my sibling made some headphones. But ever since then I wanted to make a full Vocaloid cosplay. I've just never got around to it for some reason. But now that I have the time and I kind of have some more sewing skills, I've decided to make a GUMI cosplay. And I thought it'd be extra fun to take you on the journey with me. So all the Vocaloids have a lot of different outfit options, but I decided on this one because it's her go-to outfit, which makes it a lot more recognisable than any of her other costumes, and it also just so happens to be my favourite outfit of hers because it's bright orange and orange is my favourite colour. So I started out with this jacket that I got from Bershka for about €4. I decided to buy a jacket instead of making it all from scratch because I knew it would be easier to get the structure correct. The first thing I did was I took out the shoulder pads because they did not look that good, and also they are not something that she has in her outfit. And then I decided where I wanted to crop it, and to crop it I put down a book on top of it just so it kept it nice and flat, and I cut a straight line all the way across the bottom, making sure to keep that extra bit of fabric intact because I wanted to use it later on. Then I started the very long task of sewing it all by hand. At this point I was still living in the Netherlands and I did not have a sewing machine, so I had to hand sew it, and it took about 40 minutes and it's quite messy, especially the inside. It looks awful, but honestly I'm very happy with what I did because I'm very bad at hand sewing and I'm very out of practice also. The next job was cropping the sleeves, and what you see now is not how it looks in the end. I ended up putting a bias binding tape around it because it looked so messy and it would not stay flat. But the sleeves definitely needed cropping because hers are much shorter than what they are on this top. Apparently I didn't film myself putting on the bias binding, but this is what it looks like. This is a gold bias binding I had left over from my Annalise cosplay, and I think it looks so much better now. To keep the jacket closed, I decided to use popper buttons. I went this route because I knew that the jacket would stay much flatter if I did this, instead of using an average button. And then for the blue button you actually see on her outfit, I went with a faux button. So for this I used an actual button, I painted it blue, and then I sewed it on one layer of the jacket. So when it's closed, it actually looks like it's an active button, but it's not actually doing anything, it just looks cool. And that's the jacket completely finished. Next I moved on to making the bodysuit that's going to go underneath everything. For this I used this really beautiful holographic gold fabric. It's one-way stretch, I wish it was four-way stretch. The website said it was four-way stretch, but it is not, which makes things a little bit more complicated, but we're going to work with it anyway. To make the bodysuit I used this pattern that's actually the first iteration of the bodysuit I made for my Shaman revamp video, which I'll link up in the corner because it's also a cosplay video, so if you like this you'll probably like that as well. It's a very simple pattern. I believe I just drew around a swimming costume with a lot more leeway on either side, and I'm just going to put it down flat on this fabric, cut it all out twice so I have a front and a back, and then sew it together down the sides. The one thing I had to remember was to keep the stretch going lengthwise across it so it will fit over my body correctly, and if it was stretchy the other way as well, you would stretch it while you're sewing it, but because it didn't actually stretch the other way I didn't need to do that for this. This was a very simple process. I ended up fitting it to myself a little bit better, but overall it only took about 20 minutes to do. For the sleeves I actually put the waistcoat over the top of the bodysuit, drew where the sleeves ended, cut across that line, and then sewed all the way around just to stop it from fraying. I also did this on the crotch seams, but I didn't film that part. For the collar it was a very simple story. I marked on where I wanted to cut it out, and then I used bias binding just to make it look a little bit prettier. It doesn't lay as flat as I'd like it to, but it does look a lot better than if it was just that horrible stitching along it, so I think it works okay for a cosplay, but I don't think I could wear this as normal clothing. But that's the bodysuit all done, and I think the cosplay is looking pretty good so far. Moving on to the bottom half of the outfit, I decided to make it all one piece. This is just to make it easier to get on and off, and it also means the style isn't going to fall out of place throughout the day. So I started out with this thick canvas-like fabric that I have, and I cut out a very long and thick waistband. I then folded that waistband in half and sewed it along the line. Spent far too long turning it inside out. I know there's a trick for it, but I don't know it, so it just took forever. After that I ironed it flat, and then I folded it in half and ironed it again so it has one side that's closed and one side that's open. As you can probably tell, it's not the right colour for this outfit, so I decided to paint it. I was hoping that the paint would make it a lot stronger because this is a very thick, strong fabric, but this way I'm hoping it won't fold over on itself too much because it is meant to be a belt. This is the exact same paint I used before for the button. If you're wondering why there was paint all over the table before, this is why. With the belt done for now, I moved on to the skirt. For this I wanted to make a circle skirt, so I just took a piece of ribbon, cut little holes at the length I wanted the skirt to be, and then used it as a giant compass to make 2 circles on this fabric, which is the same fabric that I used for the bodysuit if you can't quite tell right now. I then realised I didn't have enough fabric to make a full circle skirt. Luckily I originally planned on making it a pleated skirt, so I could take off a little bit of the size of the second panel without any issues. With the pieces all cut out, I just sewed the skirt together down the sides. I then put the skirt on the inside of the belt, so where the opening of the belt was before where I ironed it flat, the skirt just goes directly into there, with the green side of the belt and the gold side of the fabric facing upwards. I honestly don't really know how to explain it, so I hope that makes sense. At this point point I didn't sew the belt closed, I just sewed the skirt onto the back side of the belt because I still had something to add in this little gap here. Going back in time a little bit here, I took the bottom half of the orange jacket that I had in the beginning, cut that piece in half so I had 2 long strips, and then here you can see I took one of the strips, cut it in half again, and I just fiddled with it until it looked like the bottom half of the orange fall that goes over her skirt. I sewed those little folded sections into place, and then went on to sewing it into the belt just the same as I did with the skirt, except this time I sewed the front of the belt completely onto the skirt and the fall, so now it's one solid piece that's not going to come apart. Now onto the second part of the fall. This is pretty much the exact same process as I just did, but this time I just sewed it on the back of the belt instead of inside the belt, making sure at all times that the inside was not going to be seen when I was actually wearing it. I tried to keep it as flat as I could, but it does end up looking a little bit bulky. I think it's okay because it's not actually going to sit on my waist, it's going to sit on my hips, but I do wish it wasn't quite as thick. After all that was finished, the only thing left to do was add in a zip. I usually find this process quite fiddly, but for some reason it went really well this time. I don't know if I'm getting better at sewing or if I just got lucky. I probably just got lucky. And that's the whole skirt done. I will be wearing an underskirt underneath it, so it won't look as flat as this, but I don't actually have it in my house right now, so you'll just have to wait for the final reveal. With the main outfit all done, I moved on to accessories. So I started out with the wrist cuffs. I wanted to keep the pattern really simple, so I did it all in one piece instead of making it 3 separate pieces, which would be the cuff and then the 2 spikes. I started out by outlining my pattern onto my interfacing. This is an iron-on interfacing and it's just going to keep it nice and stiff. And I obviously cut out 2 of these because I was making one for each wrist. For the fabric, I went with this really nice white bridal fabric that I had left over from my Annalise cosplay. And while it does look very fancy and it might stand out a little bit too much, I really like this fabric and really wanted to use it. But anyway, I first ironed on the interfacing, then I cut out 2 layers of the white fabric and sewed them right sides together. Which in this case, because there is no right and wrong side of this fabric, it just meant that the interfacing was always facing upwards. I then flipped it inside out and ironed it again, but apparently I didn't film any of that. So this is just me sewing up the end of the cuff, as I had to leave that side open so I could actually flip it. Then I added little poppers to keep it closed. I then went on to making faux cufflinks to stick on the outside. I decided against having real cufflinks because I find them so awkward to use and I didn't really know how to make them either. So this was my alternative. I made it out of clay. I just used the top of a concealer bottle so they'd all be completely uniform. And then I painted the red with acrylic paint and then glued them onto the cuffs with a little bit of glue. And I think they came out really cute. I'm very happy with them. Now onto the collar. This was pretty much the exact same process that I just did for the cuffs, so I won't go into too much detail. I'll just say that it was making a pattern, cutting out interfacing, ironing on interfacing, sewing it together, which I apparently didn't film, ironing it once again, putting on a popper button, making a little gem out of clay and painting it red, and then sticking it into place. And with that, it was all done, and I think it came out really cute. Now onto the final accessory, which is the headphones. So I started out by making the earphones. For this, I used my actual headphones as a base, so I just drew around them to get the right shape and the right size, and then cut them out. Oh, and I'm using cardboard for this, but I'm pretty sure you've already noticed that. And the reason I'm using cardboard is because it's corrugated, which means I can bend it really easily around all these circular shapes, which you'll see me doing right now for the outside of the earphones. I just cut long strips of corrugated cardboard and then bended it around the cardboard disc that I already made. It was very simple. I definitely wanted to keep these as simple as possible. And I purposely left a little bit of a gap. I did this so I had space to put the headband into these, but I did realise it was much too thick, so I made little tiny pieces of cardboard with a hole in it, which I could push the headband through and also secure it very easily. Then I went on to making the goggles. This process is a little bit hard to explain, so I hope the video explains it better than my words can. I basically started out by drawing out a base, which was kind of just 2 ovals attached together. They don't end up staying attached together because it wasn't working later on, but for now they're attached together. Then I cut out 2 circles that are smaller than these ovals and used these to extend the height of the base. As because the base was one piece, I couldn't wrap cardboard around them as easily as I did for the headphone bases, so this was the alternative. Next I cut out 2 much smaller circles that fit inside the original circles and gave them height in the exact same process as before, making sure that they were taller than the base that I just made. Next I cut out a piece of foam which had the same outside circumference as the bases and the same inside circumference as the little extra pieces I made to put inside the bases. I then pushed these pieces over the smaller pieces I just made and attached the outside edge to the bases, which all resulted in the goggles looking like this. After that I went on to trying to attach them to the headband. I very quickly realised that it wasn't working with the base all in one solid piece because it just couldn't bend correctly over the headband, so it ended up looking pointy on my head. I just couldn't get it to work. So I ended up cutting the pieces in half and just sticking them on individually. Now that the base was all finished, I went on to the painting. For this I started with a base coat of a very dark grey. I tried matching it exactly to the headband. I feel like it's a slightly different colour, but it's close enough. Next I dry brushed the whole thing with white, This is a very cheap white paint, so it is not very opaque at all. So usually I really hate it, but for this it worked quite well for giving it kind of silvery look. And I did also paint the headband itself so everything matched. Then I painted the fake glass of the goggles red as it is in the original design, and I used the red straight out of the tube so it will match the gems and the wrist cuffs I made earlier, and moved on to making the little headphone. For this I just used craft wire, laid it up so it would be stronger, and then wrapped a wire all the way around it to keep its shape. Then I very simply wrapped it in thin sheets of foam. Then I made a hole in the headphone so I could push it through and secure it with a lot of glue. And with that my headphones are done and we're on to the final step. For the wig I used this green one that I got for my shaming cosplay, and I decided to edit it only ever so slightly so I could still use it for that cosplay but also use it for this cosplay. So I wanted the longer pieces at the front to be more obvious, so I cut the hair at the back a little tiny bit, and I also went through and backcombed all underneath so it was a little bit thicker and just looked a little bit better on my head because I feel like it makes my head look a little bit small. But with that done, we're on to the final reveal at Comic Con. Comic-Con was so much fun with this character. I got recognised so many times, which I was actually surprised about because I thought people didn't know who Gumi was anymore, but I got recognised so much and it was so nice. I met so many lovely people. But in terms of the cosplay, the headphones would not stay on my head, so I ended up having to grip them into place, which worked fine for the rest of the day. And then the wrist cuffs would not stay closed, so my sister ended up sewing me into them, so I will have to go in with some stronger popper buttons at some point, but they look quite cute with being sewn on anyway. I had so much fun making this cosplay, so I really hope you like it. If you did, give this video a like, comment down below what else you'd like me to do, maybe some characters to cosplay, and subscribe as I post a video every single week and I'd love to see you again. But until then, bye!